Welcome to a wonderful evening of great speakers, wonderful energies, and it's my privilege to introduce Claire Beynon. And you can read all these wonderful things about Claire in the program. Those wonderful things is that she's a fabulous artist, a wonderful poet, and a deep inquiring mind into what is behind and within substance, what is consciousness. But what I want to tell you is the story of my coming into Claire's house. And what I discovered on entering Claire's house is that everything that Claire touches is art. I'm a Cancer. I love houses. But usually they're relatively boring. All you're exposed to is the personality of the person that's living in that house. But with Claire, it was like walking into the Guggenheim. Every wall, every doorknob, every window pane, every surface had been transformed into a work of art, a series of questions, a startling revelation. And it makes me think that there are almost endless riches to Claire and what Claire will share with us. So here you go, Claire.
Thank you, Lawson, and thank you all for coming. It's a real joy and a privilege for me to be standing here tonight, and thanks for your company. Where is my presentation? So this evening's presentation will be something of a journey. It's taken a few unexpected turns in the last few days because I thought I was going to speak primarily about Antarctica, actually, but Antarctica has taken itself off elsewhere. So there may be a few surprises in this evening's presentation, but along the way you'll see water is a linking element, and I'll be introducing you to a cast of characters amongst these vessels of varying description, a flotilla of silver and white bamboo boats that came to Antarctica with me, a wooden carver bowl, plumb bobs, a spirit-level lady, and inevitably my own mutable vessel, me. I stand before you in the relative chaos and relative coherence of my own story. It'll become quickly apparent that my language is metaphor. I'll be reading a poem. I thought I was going to read 3, but I will be reading 1 poem, showing a lot of still images and 3 short video clips. My presentation will close with a 5-minute wordless meditation, a visual poem whose spaces I will invite you to enter and set yourselves adrift in. Start with this piece called Jumble. I call that piece Jumble. Watching it was uncomfortable, wasn't it? There were too many things going on. No matter how enchanting or mysterious the individual elements, the carefully chosen strands of music, the rocking, floating motion, the ice shards, the clarity of the underwater environment, the profusion of elements led to a sense of chaos, of clamor, cacophony, confusion. Today's world is being knocked from just about every quarter and on virtually every level by fear, separatism, negativity, aggression. If ever there was a call for beauty, for poetry, for pause. Now is the time. Protest through noise and clamour does not work. It seems to me we've forgotten how to listen, that the way towards connection and integration is through the spaces, through active listening, and through acknowledging fear and catastrophe, but not focusing on them, focusing instead on wonder, on beauty, mystery, complexity, and the poetry of ourselves, of each other, and the world we live in. We are all saying the same thing here during this conference, namely, that we're being called to re-engage, we're being called to restore right relationship. In his 1963 collection of meditations on non-violence, Strength to Love, Martin Luther King wrote, "To return hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a sky already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." We are being called to stand in the heart. This is another uncomfortable image. It shows a variety of amaryllis thrusting its way out of arid ground. The foreground is a chaotic battlefield of what look like broken bones and malformed phalluses, but that are in fact a plant that grew in my Cape Town garden. Hemanthus cochineus. 1994 was the year of the horrifying genocide in Rwanda, during which an estimated 800,000 people were murdered in the conflict between the Hutu and Tutsi people. The prolonged injustices and trauma that South Africa, my country of origin, had endured for so long weighed heavily, and even though we were on the brink of a new era with the abolition of apartheid and Nelson Mandela's election imminent, the news of Rwanda's suffering threw me into tumult. Drawing was the only way I could express my anguish. For me, this piece was a lament. It contained the sounds and textures of bewilderment and brokenness, highlighting the damage that occurs when there is a profound imbalance of masculine and feminine energies. Yeats's poem, The Second Coming, seemed to speak right into the heart of the Rwandan situation. I learned some time after I'd completed this work that the colloquial name for the Hemanthus cochineus is in fact blood flower. It emerges out of the ground all masculine, holds an erect, unyielding position for approximately 2 weeks before the flower opens, exposing, as it does, the most exquisitely complex and feminine of forms. Although I wasn't looking for this image while I was preparing for this presentation, it seemed suddenly so relevant to here and now, to the chaos we're experiencing globally on every level. I learned recently that Kigali in Rwanda is to host the Unity is Strength Foundation's International Peace Conference next year. The healing that's taking place in that country is extraordinary and demonstrates an almost incomprehensible capacity for forgiveness and reconciliation, which is why I wanted to show it here, this conference, with the theme of the fourth ray. When we bring love to bear, even in the most overwhelming of situations, healing, whole-making is always within reach. Just to place you in the land from which I come, Aramoana means gateway to the sea, and it's a beach, a local beach, about 20 minutes away from where I live in Dunedin, a place I go to often to walk, to still myself, to recharge myself, both. 1994 was a significant year personally too. It was the year I immigrated to New Zealand with my family, a time of adventure and also of disorientation. I was reluctant to leave South Africa, even though I knew instinctively that I was heading towards New Zealand and towards what the Maori there term Turangawaiwai, my Turangawaiwai, which is the place where my soul comes into alignment. This work, titled Crossing, is one of my very first New Zealand works. Prior to this one, I spent 18 months working on a huge drawing, the size of about 2 doors. It refused to resolve, and in the end I took it down from its backing board, tore it up, respectfully, thoughtfully, thankfully, into pieces, bundled all of these but one up, acknowledged the struggle with them, placed them in the bin. The fragment I kept carried a skein of roots trailing across a clear blue sky. It was only then that I was able to begin working properly, working again. Sometimes we have to literally tear structures down before the new form can take place. can take its shape. The kava bowl in this image was gifted to my grandparents by a young Malawian man way back in the 1960s. It lives with me now, not he, but the bowl lives with me now in my Dunedin home. Kava bowls are ceremonial vessels in many of our world's indigenous cultures. I incorporated it in this work as a symbol of both offering and receiving, of surrender and receptivity, a tribute to both the country I had left, in which I was born, and the country that I would make my home. Now, I'm going to jump from these actual, concrete, physical environments to the virtual landscape of the World Wide Web. Having participated in a number of online training courses this past year, I can say with conviction that the ethos in the ether is both very like and quite unlike any of the traditional relationships I experience in my everyday world. Take, for instance, blogging and Ning communities. There is a potency and immediacy peculiar to web-based communities that overwrites conventionally perceived limitations such as age, political bias, ethnicity, chronos time, measurable space. The web is organic, a mighty equalizer. Like the ocean, it wraps us around, drawing our continents together. We take our place around a virtual table, and at the press of a key, enter worlds we might ordinarily not have access to, with people we might ordinarily never meet. Before we know it, we're engaging in a depth of communication that has all the elements of privileged encounter and sacred space. Scientists and philosophers have plenty to say about the evolutionary potential of social networking. The digital revolution, they say, has a lot to tell us, not only about the emerging society of the 21st century, but also about the farther reaches of human consciousness. In an essay on this subject, Sam Keane writes, "One of the most compelling metaphors comes from physicist and philosopher Peter Russell, who sees globe-spanning computer networks as part of an embryonic global brain. Extrapolating from recent theories in the fields of physics and geobiology, he maintains that the planet itself is a living system, and that each person on it a cell in a kind of growing global nervous system. As a species, he says, we're advancing to the point where it will be possible for our minds to link together to create a collective human consciousness," which is what we've all been talking about. The interlinking of humanity that began with the emergence of language has now progressed to the point where information can be transmitted anywhere to anyone at the speed of light. Billions of messages continually shuttle back and forth in an ever-growing web of communication, linking the billions of minds of humanity together in a single system. How magical is that? The subtitle of my presentation is "It is all one water. A finger in a tide pool brings our shores together." Marilyn Kelly, who wrote this line, and I met on the internet about a year ago. We are members of a burgeoning and increasingly intimate blog community, most of whom have been writing in this format for a couple of years now. I started my first blog, Icelines, now called All Finite Things Reveal Infinitude, which is a line from a Ruthka poem, in 2008, whilst in a field camp in Antarctica. I find myself treating fellow bloggers' space with an attitude akin to reverence. Why is this? Because it seems to me that the men and women who gather together in these virtual spaces find each other out of happy accident, mistake, or miracle, then continue to come together by intention. The connections being daily forged and deepened have the timbre and characteristics of a soul group. In a nutshell, we've become fellow travellers, companions on the road. And to my very great joy, after the conference, I'll be going across to Boston and meeting with a group of these very fine writers, which is very thrilling in the flesh. Yeah. About halfway through last year, my growing appreciation of the internet and its far-reaching communication potential led me to develop a new blog dedicated this time to a body of work whose focus was to be the wonder, fragility, and power of our world's oceans. The blog and the exhibition title were to be the same, namely www.watersihaveknown.blogspot.com. The site provided me with a kind of online studio and notebook, a place and means by which I could chronicle my investigations and make my studio processes transparent to others. It also created a space for topic-specific community exchange, and through this, ignited a potential for intercontinental and interdisciplinary collaboration. What was curious to me was during this process of painting, I went in search of something on the web, and I clicked onto Google Images and saw that the interface had actually changed while I'd been painting, and in fact the structure, the composition of the Google pages is so like the paintings that I was making. It was kind of remarkable, and I rather like that because I love the idea of being able to metaphorically click on any of those images and enter a space and actually explore and travel in ways that we can on the web. There are layers and layers and layers and layers, which is very much like the unconscious. There's an endless depth to the places we can go. So the early paintings in the Waters I Have Known series explore deeper. They were a response to the oil catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico. As the series developed, I invited friends to consider with me the internet as an ocean of a different kind, and was astounded by the range and richness of text that readers contributed in response. One of the questions I posed was this: if water is the medium of the unconscious, might we consider the web its metaphorical equivalent? With their permission, I incorporated their words in a number of my Gulf paintings. You will see that these paintings have as their compositional template the turtle shell, a form that references the Gulf crisis, but also the metaphorical breastplate, protective shield, shelter, multi-chambered heart, each of which we do well to take care of. So the words on these images are words of readers from the blog community from all over. One of the things that filled me with an ongoing sense of gratitude during this web-based process was the generosity with which men and women, most of whom have never met, responded to this invitation to participate. A community comprising artists, writers, scientists, musicians, farmers, teachers, a midwife, a police detective, and a nun. We are a composite, a cross-section of ordinary, extraordinary life. Together we are more than the sum of our parts. A small yet global collective hailing from places as far-flung as Ireland, Australia, USA, Germany, India, the UK, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, Italy, and Tasmania. Without exception, prose and poetry were offered up as gifts, no strings attached. It was because of the internet that this was possible. If for those of you not familiar with the blog interface, there's a gadget on there, a followers gadget. This allows people who come to your blog who are regular readers to actually sign in, receive news of updates of articles you might have written, and actually to post a photograph of themselves and a link to their own blogs. So I thought, in honor of these people who had contributed, I would do a series of paintings, oil on board paintings, just acknowledging the kind of anonymous, faceless people, but I say faceless more in terms of egoless people, because there really is a deep sense of respect in these communities that I wanted to honor. And in there, of course, are some of the web emblems that would be familiar to all of you: LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, Twitter. Yeah, so it's just a bit of fun. Questions of balance. One of the long-term themes of my work is to do with paradox and notions of poise and balance. For most of us, life's a juggling act. How often do we speak of being too busy, moving too fast, doing too much? How can we be engaged and proactive on the one hand, and detached and simply living in time on the other? Is balance achievable? Do we only come to it or recognize it through our experience of imbalance? I reflect much on the sacredness of everyday objects, and too on the sacredness of everyday places, encounters and happenings. The apparently simple thing can be extraordinarily complex, and the most mundane thing profound. I remember clearly my first encounter with a spirit level. I was 7 years old, rummaging amongst my grandfather's tools in his garden workshop in Johannesburg. When I came face to face with a spirit bubble adrift in the clear glass vial, I was enchanted. That encounter marked the beginning of a long and beautiful relationship. Little did I know that 41 years later, I would find myself on a computer Googling spirit vials, only to find myself led to the site of Gaia and Bloom, which is a small family-run factory in the US, in Troy, who'd been manufacturing glass vials since, for I think, 102 years. And as it happened, it was just 10 minutes from the labs that I had been working in on collaborative art science projects with my Antarctica scientists. So that was curious. But one of the writing projects that I'm busy with at the moment, I'm incubating, has the working title Significant Others. And it focuses in on men, women, and animals and objects that rarely, if ever, fall under the spotlight, and yet whose contributions to the community are essential, valuable, and often overlooked. In the Spirit Vial factory, there was a woman whose job description must be one of the most unusual around. She's the person responsible for the capture and release of the enigmatic bubble at the center of the Spirit Vial. The one who transforms what would otherwise remain a lifeless, meaningless piece of glass into an instrument of precision. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote for her. Her name is Frances, and I thought I'd play on the story of Troy and Helen of Troy, just for fun. It's called Spirit Level Lady. This is not the first time she's been here. Anticipation makes her clumsy. She brings the door knocker down. Too hard, Helen, too loud. But wait. She's not inside the building yet, is standing still on the rough side of the door, wood and woman, momentarily chagrined on the tatty outskirts of Troy. Tugboats, trains, traffic, impatient calligraphy of sound. She waits on the red brick steps at the high tide mark. Above the factory keeper's door, neither plaque nor polished bell. Instead, a weather-worn lintel, tough as a loved old face, grooved, striated, shocked rigid by age, and 4 strong numbers staking their claim. 1907. 1907. She cannot help herself. Quickly does the sums. 1 plus 9 equals 10, plus 0 plus 7 plus 0 plus 7 equals 17, 7 plus 1 equals 8. Of course, the perfect number for sanctuary and business. Behind the uncarved door, the double shuffle of footsteps. David, Russell. They click back the latch, usher Helen in. Men of few words, they're all shyness and grace. Manage hello and thank you. And how have you been? She checks an inappropriate thought. Heavens, woman. You want to take your shoes off? You can't. This is a factory. It's a chapel. I must. In her head, where mercifully everything is possible, she does both. Upstairs on the factory floor, her eyes adjust to the light. 3 silhouettes, sacristans dressed in deep purple robes, look up, nod, and continue about their business. Helen hears humming. Where are the choristers? The darkly timbred pipe organ. And then she recalls the previous time, late afternoon industry striking up music, the pedal-board bellow of wind amongst lathes, the percussive slip-slop of slip over metal and slurry over glass. She remembers the mellow undertones of ochre flocculant in a small harbour basin, glass tubes oscillating in a modest side room. Here now, they urge her to touch, pick up the pieces, take photographs. She runs her fingers over tall mesh racks, shining bronze mushrooms, cools her cheeks on damp clay moulds. A little further on, a blackened steel workbench is the night sky, laid out for the taking. Constellations, planets, glowing glass moons. You work in the apse of a cathedral, she says. Shh, is David's one-word reply. In the furthest corner of the last small room, Helen finds Frances, focused on her task. Each glass vial is given a 2-minute circle of attention. She has the capture and release of bubbles down to perfection. At the end of the day, it's Frances who makes these fragile spirits soar. Every piece a perfect promise. Helen asks her if she remembers how it felt to be a girl, barefoot in a light cotton sundress, blowing soap bubbles in the garden. She leaves, wanting nothing more than to skip and dip a wire wand into a glass jar sticky with dishwashing liquid and glycerine. So, of course, my visit to the Spirit Level factory gave rise to an exhibition called Questions of Balance. And yeah, as I said, it's been a long time preoccupation. If I had my way, we would have no more clocks and calendars, and everybody would have a glass spirit vial in their pocket to check their balance rather than check the time. One day, perhaps, we make that happen. I have a jewelry project brewing. So these are just a few pieces of work from that series, very much talking about our current situation. I think this the gathering momentum, this sense of portent and tension, and then the resolve. And what I do usually in exhibitions, I try to get all the pieces that are part of one exhibition in conversation with each other, so they exist independently on their own, but they set up conversations between each other. So, it's one coherent whole. So, yeah, not rebelling to agitate trouble, but as a lover of something poses questions. And then, of course, the still point, which is like the full stop, which is not quite my full stop because I have one more story. How am I doing time-wise? Ah, perfect. So, yeah, this will take us on a little visit down to Antarctica. One morning I was going through quite a stressful time in my life, and I woke up with this prompt to make paper boats, to get up and go and fold paper boats. I thought, that's really odd. Why on earth would I want to go and make paper boats? But I did as prompted and ended up making a great number of paper boats. I didn't know what I was making them for. All I knew is that I was to forget about the whys and wherefores and just get on with the task. It became something of a ritual, though, and I soon realized that it was an excellent way to steady myself and to find focus. The activity took on the qualities of a meditation, became a way of stilling down my thoughts and dissipating the generalized anxiety that I was feeling at the time. So I ended up making 220 at that session, over a period of a couple of weeks. But of course, every morning, I was a little way into the process when I came across a poem by Seamus Heaney, and in it he said it was called The Flight Path. And in it he wrote, a dove rose in my breast every time my father's hands came clean with a paper boat held between them, arc in air. The lines of it as taut as a pegged tent. High-sterned, splay-bottomed, the little pyramid at the center, every bit as hollow as a part of me that sank, because it knew the whole thing would go soggy once you launched it. So clearly I was going to have to waterproof them. I came up with a new design, simpler, tighter folds, all the rest, blah, blah, blah. I tried applying gesso, and it actually didn't work. But then one day I went into town in search of a potato peeler, and there in the kitchen shop I saw a whole bunch of bamboo picnic plates. I thought, bamboo. Bamboo is an Antarctica material. It's the one non-hazardous natural material that is allowed down there. I thought, that's perfect. I'll take those home and take the bamboo home and see what I can do. So if it was the perfect material, I ended up making this great flotilla of boats, and then there they are in Antarctica, the film set. And I handed them over to the scientists and divers to take 80 feet under the ice and to film. Of course, they have to invert, much like the spirit vials. They have to capture a little bubble of air in order to actually drift under the ice. This is a very short film of them under the ice. So I was hoping to say something about our solo voyage and also our communal voyage. So us, the soul group, but also the individual within the soul group. So this is just a very short clip which has been incorporated in a film called Hidden Depths, Poetry for Science, which actually goes into quite a lot of the science I was involved with the Antarctica people. And of course there's always a wounded boat. Yeah. So I'll move on from there. That's the film. Of course one thing always leads to another. And yeah, I have a poetry book called Open Book, and I was lucky enough to be part of the printing process, and at the end of the printing process the publishers were going to just toss hundreds of pages of proofs, and it was beautiful 100% cotton acid free paper. I just said, you can't throw this away, I have to take them all home. So I sort of loaded up my boot. The car was sort of down on the ground, and took them home. It took me I don't know how many loads to take them out of the boot and into the studio. But anyway, they've come in very useful because again, recently I was accompanying a very dear loved one through a period of crisis, and one way that I could stay linked during that process to her was to actually create boats as a form of prayer. It was a mindfulness practice for me, and a way of staying connected. And much as I would light candles, I would make boats. This time I made 1,000, and they were paper as opposed to bamboo. You can see here they are lining up. They became part of an exhibition called the Museum of Obsessions in Dunedin. But what was rather lovely was the curator of the exhibition actually had invited me to do a boat installation because she'd seen the Antarctica film and really loved the boats. And I said I would do it on one condition, that it wasn't kind of the neurotic obsession, that it was more the meditative obsession, and I could turn the room that the film would be shown, the installation which had a film projected over it, if I could turn it into something of a meditation temple, and it would be silent and people could come in and spend time. They could remove themselves from their hectic lives and the traffic and just come into a space and settle. So she agreed to that. And so this is just showing a few shots of them. And I'm going to end with a meditation which is very much about the group soul, because this work came about as a result of a very personal experience of pain and of healing. The two processes hand in hand. And I then went into the space with a friend of mine who had done a collaborative project with Kate, who's a beautiful hand dancer. It's just discovered that that she's a hand dancer, and so we spontaneously in the moment just set up this happening, and I had my camera with me, so I filmed her hand dancing with a film projector from Antarctica over the boats, and it suddenly became a global piece. It became about the group soul, that moving through the personal and into the universal. So if you'd like to just accompany, there's a music soundtrack with it, but I just invite you to just enter the space that will be projected now. Thank you very much for your attention and your company. Just one thing. You might like to read that before from my friend Timothy, who lives in New York. Okay, now I have to just click this on and full screen. Blessings, everyone.